When we think of how America was built, who comes to mind? We often hear about famous generals and presidents, the founding fathers who signed declarations and wrote constitutions. But what if I told you the real story is so much bigger, so much more complex, and involves millions of people whose names we'll never know? These are the true giants of America's past, the hidden figures who laid the very foundation of the nation. Before any European ships reached its shores, this land was already home to vibrant, advanced civilizations. Native American societies had been thriving for thousands of years. They weren't just living off the land. They were architects of intricate societies with sophisticated agriculture, extensive trade routes that crisscrossed the continent, and complex systems of governance. The Mississippian culture, for example, built Cahokia, a city larger than London was at the time. The Haudenosaunee, or Iroquois Confederacy, created a political alliance that inspired some of the very concepts the founding fathers would later adopt. When the first European settlers arrived, they were entering a world that was already ancient and deeply understood by its inhabitants. It was Native American knowledge of the land, the seasons, and survival that made the first colonies even possible. They were guides, trading partners, and sometimes fierce protectors of their own land in the face of encroachment. Their story is not a prelude to American history. It is the first chapter. Now, let's turn to those early settlers. The story we often get is one of brave pioneers destined for success. The reality was far grimmer. The first arrivals at Jamestown and Plymouth faced brutal conditions. They were unprepared for the harsh winters, the unfamiliar diseases, and the constant threat of starvation. The survival of these early colonies was anything but guaranteed. In Jamestown, a period known as the Starving Time saw the colonist population plummet. They survived only through a combination of sheer desperation and, crucially, the help of local native tribes, like the Powhatan. It was a relationship of both cooperation and conflict, a complex dance of dependence and mistrust that would define the American frontier for centuries. The success of these first footholds wasn't a solo achievement. It was a testament to human endurance and the often overlooked interactions between two vastly different worlds. But as the colonies grew, who did the actual building? Who cleared the forests, planted the crops, and constructed the cities? A massive part of this labor fell on the shoulders of individuals who had no choice in the matter. Millions of enslaved Africans were forcibly brought to America, and their unpaid labor became the engine of the colonial economy, especially in the South. They cultivated tobacco, rice, and cotton, the cash crops that generated immense wealth for the colonies and, later, the United States. Their skills in agriculture, craftsmanship, and construction were indispensable. They built plantations, cities, and even parts of the U.S. Capitol. Their story is not a footnote. It is central to understanding America's economic foundation. At the same time, waves of immigrants arrived seeking a new life, often finding themselves in grueling, low-paying jobs. Irish immigrants fleeing famine dug the canals and laid the railroad tracks that connected the young nation. Chinese laborers braved treacherous conditions to blast through the mountains of the Sierra Nevada, completing the transcontinental railroad. German, Italian, and Polish immigrants filled the factories of the industrial North, powering America's rise as a global economic force. These groups faced discrimination and hardship, yet their sweat and sacrifice built the physical infrastructure of the country we know today. Their contributions are etched into our cities and landscapes, even if their names are absent from the history books. Of course, we can't ignore the visionaries, the thinkers, and politicians who imagined a new kind of nation. People like Washington, Jefferson, and Hamilton were indeed revolutionary. They debated fiercely over the nature of freedom, government, and individual rights. The documents they created, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, introduced radical ideas of liberty and self-governance to the world. They designed a republic, a system intended to be ruled by the people. However, their vision was tragically incomplete. The ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness did not apply to everyone. The same men who spoke of freedom owned slaves. The rights they established were, for a long time, reserved for white, property-owning men. So while their intellectual contributions were monumental, we must also acknowledge the profound contradictions at the heart of their project. And where were the women in all of this? Their role has been almost completely silenced in traditional histories, but they were absolutely essential. While men were debating politics or fighting wars, women were running the show back home. They managed farms, businesses, and households. They were the economic backbone of the family unit. During the Revolutionary War, women weren't just waiting patiently. They served as spies, carrying secret messages. They worked as nurses on the battlefield, tending to the wounded. They organized boycotts of British goods and raised funds for the Continental Army. Figures like Abigail Adams famously urged her husband John to remember the ladies when crafting the new laws, a plea that was largely ignored. The nation could not have been born, let alone survived, without the silent, tireless contributions of women. So, what is the real story of how America was built? It's not a simple tale of a few great men. It's a messy, complicated, and often painful epic of hardship, sacrifice, and dreams. It's the story of Native Americans who shaped the land, of settlers who clung to life, of enslaved people who built wealth they never shared, of immigrants who laid the tracks and raised the skyscrapers, and of women who held society together. America wasn't built by a handful of heroes. It was forged in the fire of countless ordinary lives, by millions of forgotten people from every corner of the globe, each contributing a piece to the complex, unfinished puzzle that is the United States. Recognizing all of these hidden giants doesn't diminish the story. It makes it richer, truer, and far more powerful. Thank you for watching. If this video gave you a new perspective on American history, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that challenge the way we see the past. See you next time.